Hello and a big warm welcome to this presentation from Pluralsight. My name is Andrew Mallett and I'm going to be your instructor as I help guide you through the module implementing MariaDB on Ubuntu 20.04. Well, of course, we need to understand what we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be installing and configuring the MariaDB Database Server on our Ubuntu 20.04 system. So, of course, we'll be looking at installing, securing, and by securing, we can take a look at different authentication mechanisms, the idea of what hosts are allowed to authenticate, and the MariaDB root user. We'll take a look at the default databases that are going to be on all of our installations, and we'll create our own user databases. And of course, they're the ones that are going to be useful. But along with that, we're going to need to create our own database users and grant them rights to our database objects. So when you're ready, sat comfortably, do you know what? We're going to begin. And we're going to begin by just looking at what a database server is. So a database server allows us to collect and store our information and search and report on that information really easily. We're looking at using Ubuntu 2 as our database server, but it will also have the database client installed upon it. And we'll be using Ubuntu 1 as our MySQL client, where we can then go through and connect into our database server. Now, I've put the MySQL client because the client command that we still use is MySQL. When we look at installing MariaDB, MariaDB is a community-developed fork of the original MySQL relational database management system. The project, MariaDB, is managed by the original MySQL developer, Michael Monty Vidinius, and it is intended to keep the database free and open source. By installing our MariaDB server, we're also going to be installing the client. Once we have run through the installation, we're going to be able to then connect as the database root user. But for this, the security states that we must be running as the Linux root account. So I elevate my privileges and run sudo mysql-u root. When we take a look at having connected into the database server, each of our commands will end with a semicolon. So we can list the databases with show databases, but don't forget that semicolon. We can move into a database, so a little bit like the cd command, but we implement the use command. So use MySQL. MySQL is the database we want to go into. And then once we've done that, we've got an idea of how things work, so we can exit. If we want to connect and go directly to the database, we can do the same thing. Sudo mysql-u root, but put the database name at the end of our command. We're taking directly through to the MySQL database. We can look at the content or the structure of our user table, so describe user, so we'll get to see all of our column names and the data types. Once we've done that, we can select the user column and the plugin column from our user table, and we're going to be able to see that we have our one user, the root user, but it's using the plugin that allows for Unix socket authentication, so hence we have to be root, and we can only connect from the local host because we have to be on the system to be able to connect to the socket. Now that gives us a little bit to be getting on with, and obviously we want to make sure that we can get this installed. So do you know what? That's exactly what we're going to do in our next clip. So why don't you make sure you've got Ubuntu 1 and Ubuntu 2 fired up? And once you have got them fired up, we're going to be working on Ubuntu 2 to make sure we can get our database server installed.